A single spark can start a prairie fire. Mao Zedong. Mao understood the power of small, seemingly insignificant actions to trigger massive, uncontrollable events. Is this the fate that awaits the Indo-Pacific, where the world's rising superpower, China, faces the potential of simultaneous conflict with three nations, Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines? The region is now the most contested on the globe, with stakes higher than ever before. Could China, with its formidable military and economic power, take on such a complex challenge? The question looms large. Can a giant bear withstand the combined pressure of its neighbors? But before we answer, let's acknowledge this reality. War is not just a matter of military might. Economic stability, shifting alliances, and geopolitical chessboards are just as critical in determining the outcome of a conflict.
日中両国は地域と国際社会の平和と繁栄にとって共に重要な責任を有しております。両国の間には発展に向けた大きな可能性が広がっていると同時に多くの課題や懸案が存在をしています。
China, for all its military prowess, could find that fighting a three-front war against Taiwan's resilient defense, Japan's technological and naval superiority, and the Philippines' strategic position might not be the overwhelming show of strength it expects, but rather an Achilles heel. It's an intricate web of regional power, diplomacy, and international involvement that could unravel any simplistic assumptions of victory.
中日关系处于改善发展的关键时期，中日互为近邻，同为亚洲和世界重要国家，两国关系具有超越双边的重要意义。
As Sun Tzu said, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. China's strategy has long been about dominance in the shadows, avoiding direct conflict while maneuvering for geopolitical advantage. Engaging in a three-nation war is the antithesis of this strategy. It is costly, unpredictable, and fraught with the potential for catastrophic miscalculations. Yet, the question remains, would China's military, even with its overwhelming numbers and technological advancements, prevail in such a vast, multi-front theater? General Dwight D. Eisenhower famously said, "I hate war as only a soldier who has lived it can, only as one who believes its folly and its futility." The repercussions of a three-nation conflict in the Indo-Pacific would be felt far beyond the battlefield. A war of this scale would not only devastate the military forces involved, but would also leave in its wake a human cost that cannot be quantified by strategic assessments alone. China's rise has brought it closer to global leadership, but would it sacrifice its future for a fight on three fronts? As Kuan Yew, Singapore's founding father, once said, "If you are a small country, you better learn to be neutral in your strategic and political orientations or risk being overwhelmed." China's aggressive pursuit of power in the region has rattled its neighbors. But for many, the balance of power is precarious, and small nations like the Philippines and Taiwan have increasingly leaned on global allies to avoid being overrun. The US, Japan, and even Australia play pivotal roles in this intricate web of regional defense. Could China's military juggernaut withstand the combined pressure from a coordinated front of such nations? And would Beijing risk its alliances with other global powers to sustain such a conflict? In today's world, where cyber warfare, economic sanctions, and diplomatic pressures can play a greater role than traditional combat, military strategists argue that China's power lies not just in its weaponry, but in its ability to influence global markets and manipulate international relations. However, as the Chinese leadership knows, Even the strongest strategic alliances can unravel under the weight of overwhelming force. China's military expansion, while impressive, may not guarantee victory in a war against a coalition of forces united by common cause. In the end, the question isn't whether China could fight three nations simultaneously, it's whether it should. History tells us that even the strongest empires fall when stretched too thin across multiple fronts. And the Indo-Pacific, with its rich history of naval power and shifting allegiances, could be the stage for another strategic miscalculation. The challenge for China lies not in the sheer power of its military, but in the complexities of modern warfare, where the victory is often claimed not by the strongest, but by the most strategic. As we ask whether China can fight these three giants, we must remember that in the words of Bertrand Russell, war does not determine who is right, only who is left. The cost of such a war could leave not just physical destruction in its wake, but a new world order in which the giants, no matter how mighty, are left standing, but fundamentally changed. In the realm of global military power, China's rise has been nothing short of meteoric. With a standing army of over 2 million active personnel, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, stands as the largest military force in the world, and its nuclear capability, with over 410 warheads, positions China as a formidable nuclear power. In 2023, China's defense budget, at $230 billion, was the second largest globally, supporting its massive modernization efforts. When it comes to missile technology, China leads with advanced systems like the DF-41 ICBM and the YJ-21 hypersonic missiles, capable of striking anywhere on the globe. Moreover, its navy, over 350 ships strong, makes China the world's largest maritime force, significantly boosting its ability to project power in the Indo-Pacific. The picture of overwhelming strength becomes murkier when considering the logistics of a multi-front war. The challenge of fighting simultaneously on three maritime fronts against Taiwan, Japan, and the Philippines would stretch China's military resources to the breaking point. A war of this scale would involve complex coordination and logistics, something even the most advanced militaries struggle to manage. Despite its massive numbers and cutting-edge technology, China's military might be rendered ineffective when forced to fight on multiple fronts, where the challenges of communication, supply lines, and troop movement would compound. History offers a cautionary tale. Both Napoleon Bonaparte and Adolf Hitler made the mistake of launching multi-front campaigns, and both saw their empires crumble under the strain. Napoleon's invasion of Russia and Hitler's campaign against the Soviet Union ultimately spelled disaster. These failures highlight the strategic folly of spreading one's military too thin. The lessons from these historical figures are clear. Even the most powerful forces can be defeated when they fail to account for the complexities of logistics and strategic focus. Napoleon himself wisely stated, "Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake." In the context of China's strategic ambitions in the Indo-Pacific, this quote becomes particularly relevant. Taiwan, Japan, and the Philippines are aware of China's growing power and have made significant moves to strengthen their defense capabilities and forge alliances. By playing the long game, these nations are creating a situation where China's overreach could become its downfall, particularly as it grapples with the complexities of warfare across multiple fronts. In the final analysis, while China's military power is formidable on paper, the reality of fighting on three separate fronts might reveal its vulnerabilities. The Iron Leviathan may appear unstoppable, but logistical challenges and the strategic mistakes of overextension could turn it into a paper dragon. In such a scenario, China's immense military might could prove ineffective in the face of a coordinated regional resistance, proving that even the strongest powers are not invincible when spread too thin. China's ambitions in the Indo-Pacific region have been met with growing resistance, particularly from three nations, the Philippines, Japan, and Taiwan. Together, they form what can be considered the Three-Dagger Defense, a collective barrier that could challenge China's efforts to assert dominance in the region. The Philippines lies at the heart of the South China Sea disputes, with China asserting territorial claims over vital regions like the Scarborough Shoal and the Spratly Islands. These territories are not only rich in natural resources, but are also strategically important for controlling critical maritime shipping lanes. However, China's aggressive moves in these areas have been met with fierce resistance from the Philippines, which has fought back diplomatically and militarily. A key factor in this resistance is the U.S. factor. The 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty between the U.S. and the Philippines stipulates that an attack on the Philippines could trigger U.S. military intervention, creating a formidable deterrent against Chinese aggression.
That's just part of our efforts to modernize our alliance. And these efforts are especially important as the People's Republic of China continues to advance its illegitimate claims in the West Philippine Sea.
I want to be clear. I want to be very clear. The United States defense commitment to the Philippines is ironclad. The United States defense agreement with the Philippines is ironclad. Any attack on the Filipino aircraft vessels or armed forces will invoke our mutual defense treaty with the Philippines.
Additionally, the Philippines has employed gray zone warfare tactics, utilizing civilian resistance and legal avenues such as the 2016 UNCLOS ruling, which invalidated China's claims to much of the South China Sea. This legal victory has been a powerful tool in undermining China's actions in the region. Taiwan's status as a self-governing island off the coast of China has been a source of tension for decades. However, Taiwan's determination to remain free from Chinese rule has only grown stronger, particularly in the wake of the Ukraine-Russia war. The conflict has provided Taiwan with important lessons in resilience, showing that smaller nations can successfully resist stronger invaders. Taiwan has taken these lessons to heart, fortifying its defenses with what is known as the porcupine strategy, a combination of minefields, anti-ship missiles, and drone warfare that makes any Chinese invasion a costly and difficult endeavor. The United States and its allies have increased their support for Taiwan, with arms sales totaling $19 billion in 2024. This growing military support, combined with Taiwan's own defensive strategies, ensures that the island is well prepared to withstand Chinese aggression. Taiwan's resilience, reinforced by international backing, has become a critical challenge to China's military aspirations. The Three Dagger defense, embodied by the Philippines, Japan, and Taiwan, creates a formidable barrier against China's regional ambitions. The Philippines offers both legal and military resistance. Japan has rearmed and is now a powerful military force in the region. And Taiwan remains a stronghold of defiance that receives increasing support from the international community. Together, these nations form a strategic defense that could turn any Chinese attempt to expand its influence into a costly and potentially disastrous venture. For China, taking on all three at once would not just be a logistical nightmare, but a political and military quagmire, one that may be too complex to win. While China may possess formidable military capabilities, it faces significant economic and political constraints that could deter it from engaging in a multi-front conflict. The realities of its current domestic challenges, compounded by its growing dependence on global trade, suggest that the costs of war may outweigh the potential gains. Beyond economic challenges, President Xi Jinping faces a political dilemma that could discourage aggressive military action. Internal unrest in regions like Hong Kong and Xinjiang, compounded by increasing economic dissatisfaction, presents a fragile domestic environment. Protests, demands for greater political freedoms, and human rights concerns have already posed significant challenges to the Chinese government, and the risk of further destabilization grows if China becomes embroiled in a costly war. A historical parallel that resonates here is the Soviet Union's war in Afghanistan. The Soviets, like China today, were a superpower with immense military capabilities. Yet their prolonged involvement in Afghanistan drained their resources, sowed internal discontent, and ultimately contributed to the collapse of the Soviet state. The Soviet Union's Afghanistan conflict serves as a stark reminder of how military overreach can erode domestic stability and hasten the downfall of great powers. China's current economic and political environment is not conducive to the type of prolonged conflict that would result from a multi-front war. War, especially one involving Taiwan, Japan, and the Philippines, would strain China's resources, both financially and politically. Given its already delicate domestic situation, a misstep could backfire and escalate internal unrest, potentially threatening Xi Jinping's grip on power. While China's military power is undeniably formidable, its economic and political constraints create significant barriers to the type of multi-front conflict that would arise from challenging Taiwan, Japan, and the Philippines. The risk of economic collapse, political instability, and internal unrest would likely make such a war a costly endeavor with no clear benefits. For China, the war it may not want is one that would deplete its resources, destabilize its domestic order, and ultimately put its position as a global power at great risk. Understanding when to fight and when to avoid conflict will be crucial for China's continued rise or potential fall. In the volatile and complex geopolitical landscape of the Indo-Pacific, there are unpredictable variables that could drastically alter the course of a potential conflict between China and a coalition of nations like the Philippines, Japan, and Taiwan. These wild cards include global powers, regional actors, and new types of warfare that could tip the balance in unforeseen ways. The United States, alongside its NATO allies, could become a significant force in a conflict involving China and its neighbors, especially considering their growing ties with Taiwan and Japan. If China were to engage in a full-scale war against Taiwan or other regional powers, it is likely that the U.S. would intervene, as it has made clear that it stands by Taiwan and has been reinforcing military alliances in the Pacific. A war in the Indo-Pacific could thus escalate into a global confrontation, much like the crisis in Ukraine, with NATO members potentially coming to the aid of China's adversaries, creating a complex, multi-layered conflict. The India-China border along the Himalayas is another flashpoint. While China has its sights set on Taiwan and the South China Sea, it is also engaged in a long-standing rivalry with India, particularly over disputed territories like Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh. Should tensions with India escalate, China could find itself fighting on two fronts, one in the south against its maritime neighbors, and one in the north in the harsh, mountainous terrain of the Himalayas. A second front with India would strain China's military and logistical capabilities, further complicating its already precarious situation. Beyond conventional military conflict, cyber warfare and economic warfare are emerging as critical battlegrounds. In a globalized world, cyber attacks can cripple a nation's infrastructure, disrupt its economy, and destabilize its government. A nation like China, which relies heavily on technology for its military and economic systems, is particularly vulnerable to cyber attacks. Additionally, economic warfare, including sanctions, trade restrictions, and financial isolation, could be leveraged by Western nations to suffocate China's economy during a conflict. The interconnected nature of the global economy means that a war in the Indo-Pacific would not remain confined to just military actions, but would likely involve complex cyber and economic strategies that could have a significant impact on China's ability to sustain a multi-front war. As powerful as China is, history teaches us that even the mightiest nations are not invincible. A multi-front war against the Philippines, Japan, and Taiwan, compounded by economic instability, political unrest, and the involvement of global powers, could prove to be a catastrophic miscalculation for China. The metaphor of closing a river in a box captures the essence of this potential conflict. Just as a river cannot be contained in a box without overflowing, a war of this magnitude would inevitably overflow with unpredictable consequences, spreading chaos far beyond China's borders. Is China ready for such a war, or is this a war it simply cannot afford? Only time will tell, but the risks are profound, and the consequences could be far-reaching, not only for China, but for the entire world. Thank you for tuning into our channel. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis of global issues.
各国需要团结协作，而不是分裂对抗。 人民希望开放进步，而不是封闭倒退。尽管中美两国各自情况和中美关系都发生了很大的变化，但是中方致力于中美关系稳定、健康、可持续发展的目标没有变。
President Biden is committed to responsibly managing this consequential relationship to ensure that competition does not veer into conflict or confrontation, and to work together where our interests align. We are committed to maintaining high-level diplomacy